The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. One of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 8 in particular, says that by 2030 we must achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men. In Sri Lanka, women's labour participation stands at 31%. So do women actually have access to decent jobs, to safe working places? How can we create inclusive labour markets for women and ensure gender parity? Let's find out. My guest tonight is Dr. Nisha Arunatilake, Director of Research at the Institute of Policy Studies. Good evening and welcome, Dr. Nisha.
Thank you.
Dr. Nisha, when we talk about decent work, it encompasses dignity, equality, fair wages, safe working conditions, inter alia. Could you put this into context in Sri Lanka?
Yes, sure. So now you just said that 31% is the share of women who are in the labor market. Now if you look at just that is all 15 and above women, but if you just look at the 15 to 60, it's about 38.5% of women are in the labor market, but of those only 22% are in wage employment. That means they are neither self-employed nor working for their households, so they are earning a wage, and of those only 14.5% are in full-time employment, and of the ones who are in full-time employment, only 13.5% of all these women who are 15 to 60 years of age are getting a decent wage. When I say decent wage, so we did this study for 2018. It's the legislated decent work. At that time it was rupees 13,500. So of all these women who are in the labor, one problem is we have only about a third of women in the labor market. Even of those who are in the labor market, only about of the population 13.5% are getting a decent wage. But if you look even deeper, earning this decent wage within decent hours. So the Sri Lankan legislation also specifies that a person should only work 8 hours a day. So some of these women do earn a decent wage, but they have to work long hours. Especially for females, it's a problem. You know, our culture is such that females have to bear a bigger play a bigger role in terms of providing for the family, taking care of the children, the elderly, all of that. So it is difficult when they have very long work hours. So if you just look at the women who are earning a decent wage in full-time employment, it is less than 10% of the working age. So yeah.
Could you take us through some of the barriers to women's participation in decent work in Sri Lanka?
Yes. So it is, one thing is childcare for sure. So what we found is that after marriage, when you have children, their participation drops, and unless some of them have informal helpers, their mothers or other relatives, then they can participate, but a lot of the times they can't, because they are responsible for taking care of the children, looking after their families. So one main reason is the lack of affordable quality daycare. You know, we've had 2 draft policies on improving daycare services or care services for children, but neither have been implemented. So that is a big problem.
From where did these policies originate, Dr. Nisha?
So from the ministry responsible for women and children.
Okay.
Usually, yes. So that has not been implemented. So that is one major reason why affordable childcare is not available, especially for low skilled workers. And if you look at the Sri Lankan labor market, close to 60, we don't realize that. We always say that we are a educated country and all of that. But if you close to 60% of the workers don't even have O levels. So now, unlike earlier, now because technology is such that, computers and machines are taking over the low skilled work that people used to do. If you even go to a bank, the teller, now, you have an ATM doing the job of a teller. So, those low skilled jobs are no longer there. So you need to have a higher level of education to access good jobs.
Right.
If you look at the labor market in Sri Lanka, about 60% don't even have O levels. So that is a big problem. Why? And for those people, available, there are few daycares available, but they are not affordable because they are very costly relative to what they can earn from the jobs.
So there's a disproportionate burden placed on the woman, on the mother,
Yes.
To
Take
do the
care.
job and stay home and take care of the children.
Yes. So the second thing that we identified in our studies is transport. Because transport, even if there are daycares, even difficult for the mother to go to work, but imagine taking a little child in the sort of transport that we have, crowded buses, so and they don't keep to time, there is no timetable. So even the delays that they encounter while traveling to work and coming back, that is a big cost for them because they have so much work to do once they get home also. So not having proper transport, timely transport is another problem. So third problem is the sort of abuse that they are exposed to in the buses, so which some women choose not to use public transport because of that. So that is another problem. And shall I go on?
Yeah, please do. This is very depressing, but I think it's a necessary conversation.
Yes. So the other problem is actually because of this. So we think that because of these gender roles and the bigger burden on females, it's only a supply side issue, but it has actually become a demand side issue also. So employers also realize if you have a mother working, they are less committed. I mean, I've heard people say that because they have to think about picking up their child from the school, and so they can't stay after working hours for meetings because they are worried about their families back home. So some employers, because of that, if they have the choice, they prefer to go with male employees because of these reasons. So it really affects the demand also. And the third reason is our laws, labor laws, are also paternalistic. Say, let's take for example the maternity leave. Now, maternity leave, it's the responsibility of the employer to pay for maternity leave. So what is recommended by ILO is that it should come from some common fund.
Okay.
When it is the responsibility of the employer has to incur a higher cost when they are employing females. Because if they are young females especially, they have to pay them during this maternity leave period. So this is more costly. So obviously if you are a profit making person, you would go with the males. So that is just one example.
But that is also problematic.
So that is a problem. And if even there is another legislation which says if you are getting females to work in the night, you need to have a matron. I mean, they are all added costs. I'm not saying that they shouldn't look after the safety of the workers, but the way it is drafted, it's not equal, and it makes it more costly to hire females. So I mean, all of these things.
Although equality is constitutionally enshrined in Sri Lanka, what we see is a landscape where there is a lack of proper infrastructure to support women's access to safe and decent work. So the overall system seems to be geared against women.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Well, how do you view this? I mean, from a research perspective.
So there are a lot of reasons why that is the case. One thing is, I think, the fact that we don't have enough women in parliament. These decisions, the laws, even giving priority. Even this earlier law I was talking about on providing childcare. Who decides which law should get priority and implement? So if it is majority of males, I mean, it's nothing wrong. It's just they don't understand the importance of these laws, importance of providing this childcare. So one thing is we need to have females represented in these decision-making bodies, so that their perspectives are also included when decisions are made on what policies to implement, how to prioritize them. Difficulties faced by women, so that is very important, I think. Other thing is, the one reason is we have a lot of laws, but they are not properly implemented.
Right.
Something like, say, the sexual harassment, there is a law. Or discrimination, we don't have a law on that. But sexual harassment, it is, it's a criminal offense. So even to get redress for some offense that takes place, it is very costly. And some women don't want to come forward. So you need to make it, the implementation of laws, making it easy for women to complain about it and helping them to rectify whatever the problems that they're having in the workplace. You have to facilitate that.
Dr. Nisha, how can we look at addressing the root causes of these problems instead of looking at it in a reactionary manner?
So I feel the way Sri Lanka has dealt with it is protecting the female. If there is harassment in the transport, they have provided female-only buses. But that is not the way forward, because you are not addressing the problem. You have to stop this thing from happening. Just putting all the females into separate buses is not going to stop it from.
Who are you protecting the women from?
Exactly. So you have to take action to stop sexual harassment happening. I mean, stop discrimination from happening in the workplace, rather than even in the why you need a matron if you are working in the night because of security, but you need to make sure that it's a secure environment rather than having these protective kind of laws. So I think that is the way forward.
What can we do in terms of creating awareness building around this issue to reduce social biases, to reduce the stereotypical understanding that people have had, which comes down from generations? Because women come home, they have to do the dishes, cook the food, look after the children. So we romanticize this concept of a hustling mother who does everything. We call her a superwoman, a power woman, yes, instead of identifying the fact that this dynamic is so messed up.
Correct. So I feel you have to start from the kids, the children's textbooks, for example. If you look at the textbooks, how is the mother portrayed in that? How is the father? You will always find the father with a briefcase going to work, and the mother in the kitchen cooking. I mean, that's how the textbooks portray. So I think that is how these images get into the heads of the children. And it's also the culture in the household, where the girls have to help out in the kitchen, where the boys don't have to do that. So I think all of that needs to change. That it is not what it was, say, 20-30 years ago, where the female stayed at home and the male went to work. It is everybody's working, so it needs to be fairer for everybody.
Dr. Nisha, how do you make sure that the research that you do is translated into policy, regulation, law? How do you educate the policymakers, and how do you tell them, look, this is what's happening, this is what you need to do, because you're the one with the research.
Correct. So what is happening right now is part of it. I mean, that is why I agreed to come on board, because you have to build awareness. And we also work through policy committees. When we publish, say, the Sri Lanka State of the Economy that IPS just published, then we are invited to policy committees, so they get our inputs.
Okay.
So we do that also. But we also work with other lobby groups, different NGOs.
Okay.
So we train them, we share our research with them so they can use it as well.
Do you think that approach has been successful so far, or what more needs to happen so that the research doesn't just stay in the books, but there is action?
Yeah. So if you look at actually in Sri Lanka, there is a policy on decent work, and there has been human resource development policies. They actually draft what needs to be done really well, but the problem is in the implementation of it. So we have to, right now this is not the time to talk about, because we are in a crisis and we don't have a lot of money, but we need to think about ways of implementing these recommendations that are already there. As I said, there is a recommendation on how to provide daycare for children also. Right. So the policies are there, but we need to make sure these policies are implemented, the necessary resources are put into that. One other thing is also this frequent changes that are happening to the ministries. That is also very disruptive, because there is no history of these policies. One policy is made in one ministry, and the ministry changes, and then you have a new ministry, so there is no follow-up.
Doesn't the work done thus far
get carried forward? Where does it go? They are shuffled and reshuffled so often that sometimes people lose track of what was done before. So that is actually also a big problem.
Okay. I'd also like your perspectives on the informal sector, which is largely unregulated. There are unsafe practices, and as Sri Lankans, we sometimes tend to adopt a denialistic approach. We don't like to talk about sex workers. We don't like to talk about the massage parlors which line all of our streets. So these are women, Sri Lankan women, whose work is largely unregulated, which is unsafe, and we don't really care. How do you view this?
So when you say informal sector, I'm not sure, sometimes those massage parlor workers could be in the formal sector also. So informal sector is basically workers who are not covered by legislation, Sri Lankan legislation.
Dr. Nisha, let's also talk about Sri Lanka's women who work in largely unregulated and unsafe settings. For example, the sex workers. We tend to oftentimes adopt a denialistic approach. These women operate in the most unsafe environments, and there is very little protection that is afforded to them. Even if they get beaten up or raped or killed, nobody really cares. So how do we bring them into the system? How do we afford them the protections?
So safe working environments is part of decent work. So it is in the legislation. It's, again, as I said earlier, it is part of implementation. So there has to be a way for these women to, if they have any grievances in terms of sexual harassment or unfair treatment, there has to be a way where they can complain about it and they can seek redress, which is not available at the moment. Just like for any other worker, for them as well.
So how do we, who is going to care enough to bring in policies, to bring in laws?
Yeah, so at the moment, if it is a criminal offense, you have to go to the police, and a lot of the times in the police stations also you have males who are not very caring. So you need to provide the environment, facilities, or even maybe educated female policemen, where these women who are more approachable for these kind of women. So you need to think through this and make sure that they can make use of the available laws to take advantage or to protect themselves.
Dr. Nisha, the Institute of Policy Studies has conducted a recent study with respect to women's access to decent work. Speak to us about some of the key findings and recommendations.
Okay, so what we find is actually one main reason why women don't have access to decent work is none of what we talked about. It is just the Sri Lankan economy is not creating good jobs. So we need to first invest in good jobs. So the budget was presented in Parliament just this week. If you look at, series of, I'm not just talking about this budget, but even previous budgets by successive governments, usually, they are always concerned about improving female access to work, but usually it is in terms of giving them microfinance or some kind of very easy fixes, which is not going to give them access to decent work. Because if you look at microfinance, for example, if you are a woman in a rural village, you start up a small kiosk selling something, and you are looking at your neighbors to buy things from you. They also are poor, they can't afford to buy a lot of things. They are not going to be very successful. From the start, it is not going to be successful. So if you want to improve their access to better quality jobs, you really need to think about connecting them with urban centers or even international markets where there is buying power, so that they can do industrious things, productive things, which can earn them a good wage. So you really need to think through these things, and for that, you have to have the necessary infrastructure. You have to provide them with support, inputs for their whatever they want to do. So really need to think through this very carefully, rather than making easy solutions. So that, I think, direct investments in the rural sector. So if you look at outside of Colombo, more than 30% of the workers are in agriculture. Now, so that is maybe somewhere you can start also improving the productivity of agriculture and connecting them with markets, so that there is better wages. So one main thing that we found is that it's the lack of jobs. And second thing is lack of skills. As I said earlier, 60% of the population don't even have O-levels. And there are very good jobs, in the ICT sector, in finance, very good, high quality, high paying jobs. But a lot of these workers without even O-levels can't access them. So another thing is you need to improve the skills, education.
Do you think that we need to rethink the employment paradigm? Because you said that at the beginning of the interview, that because of machines, IT,
yes,
all of the entry of more machine intensive
industrialization. Yeah. So definitely, because if you look at machines, computers, artificial intelligence, all of that is changing our labor market. The sort of repetitive manual and cognitive jobs that people used to do, even farmers, now you have tractors doing the work of some of the farmers, or the teller machines, ATMs. So you know, because of that you need to have higher levels of education to access jobs. So we need to recognize that in the education sector. So no longer, you know, just being able to read and write is sufficient. You need to have O-levels and maybe at least O-levels and some training after that, so that you can access some of the good jobs which are paying well.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nisha Arunatilake. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and your research findings.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.